Well, great morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome back to Mentorship Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Got some good quality family time. It's cold where I'm at. It shouldn't be cold in Florida in April, but it is. I'm sure it's cold where you're at too, everybody. All right, let's go. I got my notes ready. So we are actually, this is we're a month in to this 90-day series. So this is our fifth lesson. So if you've been with us from the beginning, hopefully you can start to feel how this is, building on top of each other, right? Lesson one, we challenged how you think as a leader. We learned about the difference between reacting to the present and learning to think like a futurist. And lesson two, we focused on clarity and consistency because leadership's not what you say, it's what you consistently reinforce. Three, we went deep into culture and we introduced the idea that most schools don't have an accountability problem, they have a belief problem. And we walk through that culture equation, right? Values create your beliefs drive your behavior drives your actions, and your actions gets you your results. And then lesson four last week, we made it practical, right? We talked about moving to middle, because culture is not set by your strongest people. It's set by your middle group, right? Where they're willing to accept and reinforce. So today, we're going to take this to the next level. I've got a lot of things in my hand. I'm trying to get myself situated here. Because it's one thing to think clearly and communicate clearly to understand culture and to influence people, right? But it's entirely a different thing to do all that when the pressure's on. And this time of year, if you're listening to this live or within the first maybe week or two, we're at the second half of April, we're leading into May, and this is where leadership truly gets tested. Because you're dealing with not just the challenges of now, but staffing decisions for next year, parent concerns, right, about grades, board expectations, board turnover, board change, accountability pressure, right? If your education plan may not have taken you where you wanted to this year, financial pressures, many states have not even approved their budget from last year, let alone next year. And with this new disruptor of school choice, a lot of our charter schools are seeing a decrease in enrollment, which for some of them may be the first time that's ever happened. And so what happens to most leaders in these moments is they start reacting, right? They make decisions based upon the pressure rather than leading from their principles, PLES, right? Not PAL. So today we're going to talk about that, right? Every leader faces it, but not everybody's always prepared, but how to lead under pressure. Okay. So this one's called Leading Under Pressure, How to Stay Clear, Confident, and in Control. And welcome everybody who's here live. Feel free to drop a question in the chat. I'll do some Q&A at the end here. But so lesson five is really about when the pressure increases, most leaders become reactive. Okay. If you've taken your DISC leadership profile with us, that graph number two, right? That's your pressure graph. And you can see how individuals react, right? It's how it's showing up, how the pressure is making your personality quotient rise. But high performing leaders, they stay anchored, right? They lead with clarity, they operate from principles, not emotion. So pressure doesn't create your leadership, it reveals it, right? A crisis doesn't make you a better leader, it reveals who you are. So when you're a leader and the pressure is on, not when things are just going well, right? But when the pressure is on, maybe the upset parent who came in, boards questioning you, asking hard questions, your staff is maybe struggling. Decisions have real consequences, right? Could be somebody's role for next year or maybe a major financial shift you've got to make because, the school just hasn't been able to meet all of its goals financially, right? This is when you get revealed. And so this time of year, April, May, heading into the summer, it's when the pressure really increases. We think that like towards the end of the year, like, oh, I can almost breathe, but really like you can't. because you got end of the year accountability, right? All these things happening, and there's a very short amount of time. It's a very short amount of time because once your teachers leave campus, they're gone. They're gone, right? They're gone. So when you are confident, right, and in terms of confidence, in terms of this high performing leaders, right, they don't remove pressure. They anchor themselves inside of it. So when that pressure rises, the clarity also must rise with it. And I want to say this, it's okay to be uncertain. Okay, but it's not okay to be unclear. And this is where your clarity always has to come through, especially in those more difficult situations, failure, pressure, and your leadership mindset. So, but before I get any further, I want to challenge how you think about pressure. How do you think about failure? I just picked up John's latest book, How to Get a Return on Failure. I don't know if you've seen it yet. This is John Maxwell's 90-second leadership book. It's incredible. I've read more than half of them. Uh, and every one I say is the best one that he's written, right? Every time he writes one, I'm like, oh, this is better than the last one. But it's such an important reminder for leaders because success and failure are not opposites, they're actual partners. And how you view those moments determines how you lead through them, right? How you view things is how you do things. And one of the biggest problems in leadership today is that we've really become this culture of judgment. We judge quickly, we blame quickly, we look for who's responsible instead of asking, what can we learn from this? See, high-performing leaders, they don't waste time assigning blame. They focus on the lesson, extracting the lesson. See, because the moment that individuals believe that failure is inevitable, they lose hope. That's dangerous. And when people lose hope, they just stop leading. They stop leading. And I've seen this in my own life, right? There's been moments where my ego got in the way. I thought I had, figured it out, that I didn't need to grow. I shared a little bit about that during last week's session. That's a danger of arrogance. Arrogant people don't grow. They protect their position instead of developing their capacity, instead of asking, what role did I have in this problem? So, a mindset shift that really changed the way I lead was that the problem is not the problem. The problem is expecting otherwise and believing that having problems is a problem. Because if you're in leadership, all you do is problem solve. And if you continue to think, oh, all we have is problems, all we have is problems, we just cause problems. Remember, how you view things is how you do things. There's a great story in this book that John writes, and he's written it in a couple other ones, and I heard him tell the story live, but he was sharing how he was in a plane and hit some really bad turbulence, like really close, to the runway. And it when it hit, like the plane didn't hit, correctly. It didn't, skid. So the pilot like immediately he just took back off. John said it was one of the scariest moments, right? But then they came back around and he landed again, and it was a private jet. So John was talking to the pilot after and said, how did you decide to do that? And he said, oh, I made that decision 20 years ago. This is just the first time I've had to actually do it, right? So, like a pilot, they just don't show up and hope that it works, right? They're constantly preparing for turbulence, weather, mechanical issues. They run scenarios before they even get in the air because they expect challenges. And that expectation is what helps them stay calm under pressure, what we need. the calmness, right? I mean, here's another example. I mean, you could even put charter schools into this number, but 80% of businesses fail in their first few years. 80%. It's crazy. Mainly because those, business owners didn't plan for that reality. They just had a great idea and they went for it. They didn't prepare for setbacks. They didn't prepare for the adversity. They didn't realize how hard it was going to be to run a business. Charter schools are the same way. 40% close after year 10, 55% after year 20. Why does that happen? Lack of preparation, lack of evolution, lack of growth. When the pressure's on, the decisions are not being made effectively. See, leaders don't fail because challenge exists. They fail because they don't prepare for them. They don't prepare for everything needs to be run through a stress test. And this is where it directly connects to you as a school leader. The pressure is not an interruption. It's part of the role. It's part of the role. You don't become a leader and then, deal with the pressure. You become a leader by learning how to lead through it. That's why most of you have your job. That's why you were promoted. That's why you got it. Because you're good under pressure. You're competent. You're competent. You're confident. People trust you. Now the question is, right, how are you learning to lead through the challenges? So as we move through the rest of the lesson, right, I want you to shift your mindset and stop asking, why is this happening? And ask yourself instead, what is this teaching me? How can I lead through this better? Because pressure and failure are not the enemy, right? They're the training ground for your leadership and for your team's leadership. So when you're going through challenging times, don't do it alone. Bring somebody with you, bring your team with you. Bring members of your team with you so they can learn the experience. You can model what it's like to solve problems instead of aim blame. I mean, I remember, one of the schools that I was in charge of during that 3-year run. My first day on the job, this, the staff uh, had a walkout. I didn't know any of them. I was just hired basically over the weekend. The board begged me to come to work on Monday, and I was like, "Well, I have plans to be somewhere else," but they talked me into it. I drove the 3 hours one way. I arrived in the parking lot, and there it was. There was the media. There were parents yelling at teachers, "Get back in that classroom." There was teachers taking kids out and having the news talk to them. I'll never forget this woman who somehow identified me. She was a parent. She started to videotape me. She's like, "Well, why don't you do something?" And I said, "Well, I just arrived here. I'm going to go meet the people at the front office. Aren't you worried about all this?" "No, everybody looks like they're safe. It's okay. It's okay." And that's not what she was looking for from me. She was looking for, right, a reaction. Why else would someone take their phone out? Right? See, there's lots of times that we just have to remember we may not have created this big pile, but we're the only one with a shovel right now. So we got to start, shoveling. And every major leadership mistake I've seen or made myself came when I was emotional, right? Instead of leading. I was emotional. Leaders get emotional. You can't let emotion drive your decision making, right? So reacting to a parent complaint, reacting to a major concern, staff pressure, maybe an accusation. Reaction creates inconsistency and leadership creates clarity. So 3 keys to leading under pressure. 3 keys to leading under pressure. Number one, clarity of principles, right? Before, before you go forward, you need to be clear to what you stand for. What are your non-negotiables as a person? What are your standards? What will you not compromise? Because you don't define your standards, the pressure will define them for you. And I'd be a hypocrite to say I've maintained the level of standards I want to for all of them, because I'm not. I've been really dumb many times. I've been reactive. I've been emotional. I've said things I shouldn't. 100%. 100%. And I always feel really dumb afterwards. So you got to get clear on your principles, right? What do you stand for? Number two, emotional discipline, right? Pressure is emotional, but leadership has to be disciplined. Pressure is emotional, but leadership has to be disciplined. Great books. I mean, anything Ryan Holiday, he's over my shoulder here, is fantastic. Ego is the Enemy was probably my favorite book that he read. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink is really great. Maxwell stuff is always some of my favorite. But really getting centered around values and principles, and I mean that's really made a big difference for me over the last 10 years. See, because you can't lead well if you're reacting emotionally. You must respond with intentionality, right? Around who you aim to become, and pretty much around this sentence of it's not my goal to be right. It's my goal to get it right, right? So what would getting it right look like? So that's number two. Number three is emotional. Oh, no, I already said it. Systems over reaction. Okay. Systems over reaction. So strong leaders don't make one-off decisions under pressure. They go back to their systems, right? What is it that we're trying? What is the result we're trying to get to? What's the system that's going to make that happen? Right? When a parent, complains, you follow the process. When a kid does something really dumb, you follow the process, right? You look at the policy. If you got a staff issue, a staff member's not coming to work, or whatever the situation may be. I was just talking to a leader this morning, one of our, she's got a staff member that's missed over 30 days of work already. What does your policy say? That's the conversation. This is the expectations at work. You come to work, you know, we're not a Walmart cashier role, right? We got kids showing up every day. See, systems protect your leadership under pressure, right? Follow the process and trust the process. It's so important. Okay, so three keys. One, clarity of principles. Who are you as a person? Number two, emotional discipline, right? This is, again, taking care of yourself is really important here too. So daily walks, yoga, meditation, reading, like relaxing, like really knowing and understand your body, and then filling it, right, with just great content, right? Whether it's a book or could be a calming podcast, right? Just something that's right. What is it? Um, how the mind is fed, the body is led, right? Something like that. So emotional discipline. And number three, systems over reaction. Systems over reaction. So, um, in real world application, right? If you got like a lot of parent pressure, right? You don't match their emotion, you bring clarity and you follow the process. So it doesn't matter, you're not going to let them come into the building and scream and yell and hoot. You're not going to let them come in and run the meeting, but nor you don't equal their emotion ever, right? You're calm. You let them know these are the expectations, these are the standards. We want to have this meeting, but we're not going to have this meeting with you like this. Okay. Board pressure, right? You don't react defensively. You communicate, clearly. You stay anchored to your principles. You stay anchored to the mission. You seek to understand, okay, and continuously work to build that relationship. Staffing pressures. Right? You don't lower expectations because there's a teacher shortage. You reinforce them. Remember, right? What you permit, you promote. What you permit, you promote. Pressure will tempt you to lower your standards, but leadership requires you to hold them. And this is what we constantly see in the inner circle. Many of you are, members of our inner circle. Board tension, parent issues, exceptional children issues, advocates, compliance concern, leadership stress, financial issues. And leaders aren't, struggling because they don't care. They struggle because the pressure is real and it's just on top of each other, right? And day after day and situation after situation. That's why you need perspective, structure, and support, right? So a lot of you are getting that through the inner circle, or you come into our times, or right, you're in this lesson, or are you listening to it, right? I mean, this is important for you to continue to grow as a person, so you can work through these, challenges. And when you just realize that the challenge is the challenge, it's just today's challenge. But what went wrong? When did it go wrong? How did we miss it? What are we going to do differently next time? Right? There's a system and a process for all of those to put your systems back in play to make sure that you're getting the result that you desire. So, where are you feeling the most pressure right now? And how is that pressure maybe influencing your decisions? Are you reacting or are you leading? So, over the next 30 days, I want you to be looking at like, where are your pressure points? What's not in play that's causing this unneeded pressure? Is it that you got a staff member that you're not sure if you're going to keep next year and you're worried about getting, better applicants? If you're worried about getting better applicants, then use our um, behavior-based hiring system. We got those 18 steps and we'll help you find the right, person. Remember, excuse me, marketing your school is a year-long process. It's not when you just have an opening or when you have, kids, right? You can build and rebuild systems all throughout your school to eliminate those pressure points, right? Clarify your standard. What does what does success look like here? If this school, this team, if this classroom, if this hallway, if this playground, if this car line was operating at its optimum level, what would it look like? What do we want in play? Write it out. Get everybody on the same page. Commitment to the standard. Commitment to consistency. That's what you want, right? What does good instruction look like? I had a great coaching session with my coach the other day, and they were helping me work through, some things that happened at the end of my, tenure at the school I was in charge of. And it's just really great, grounded conversation in those particular pieces, right? What does good instruction look like? Are we all on the same page here as a leadership team? What do we want all students to experience and feel and learn? Are we all on the same page? Are we committed to that consistency? Because if we don't have clarity in what we want success to look like, how can we hire the right person? How can we make the right financial decision? How can we put any of those in play if we don't have clarity in what the end result desired is? So over the next 30 days, identify your pressure point, clarify your standard, and commit to consistency. Get really clear on what that success is going to look like. Now, because remember, you don't rise to your moment, right? You don't rise to this, oh, I'm going to do this. You fail to the level of your systems. No matter what. You don't say, I'm gonna lose 40 pounds by, whatever, June 30th. Well, you'll be as successful as you follow your system. So as we start this week, remember pressure's not going away, but your response to it can always change, right? Remember, between stimulus and response, there's a moment. That moment is yours. Nobody can take that from you. That's your moment. But you decide, am I going to react or am I going to respond, right? In that moment. Because leadership isn't tested when things are easy. They're always revealed when things are hard. So I hope this lesson added some value to you. Hopefully you got something out of it, some good action steps or some just, good thoughts about kind of where you are and how you're feeling. So I appreciate you guys listening in there. And if it was good, share it with your team. Share it with your team. So I've got a couple of questions here, but we got some folks live too. And if you want to ask a question or share anything, feel free to unmute yourself. I'll give a second here. You could drop a question in the chat. So we had some questions come in via email. So if you guys ever want me to answer something on one of these calls, you can just email me the question at tom@lbleaders.com. Let me get my voice back here. All right. So question one, board pressure. How do you handle situations where your board is reacting to complaints instead of trusting leadership decisions? That's a really great question. It's probably a very common one. And I always go back to you know, where where is this coming from, right? So, for example, there was a school that they were putting a lot of pressure on the head. The board was putting a lot of pressure on the head because they said they had a teacher attrition problem, teacher turnover problem. And I said, "Well, do you?" And they said, "Yeah, we're pretty sure we do." I go, "Oh, well, what's your percentage of teachers lost?" They didn't know. They didn't have any data. They didn't even take the time to put data together. And I said, well, so if you don't know, should we find out? Like, could we go back 5 years and look at the HR kind of list and get a good idea of where the turnover was? And like, yeah. So in the meantime, I was able to find some, data from the school system that they were in. And basically prove that their teacher turnover rate was like 3 out of the 5 years, like extremely low. And then they had two years that were about the same as the school system, maybe a little higher. But even the board said, "Oh, we know exactly why that happened." Like they knew, right? So there was all this projected emotional language and feelings towards a non-truth, right? So I feel like it's always important that if you're getting like a lot of reactionary commentary or questions, I want to know where like, well, I really appreciate your concern. Where where's that coming from? Do we have a data point around that? Like let's get really clear and then let's set a goal, right? So that's what we did as a school is we set a goal where they didn't want their we don't want our, we would be concerned if our employee retention rate dropped, below, I think it was like 90% or 85 or so, something to that effect. But at least they had a standard now, right? At least they had a standard. So you don't win board trust in a moment, right? You build it over time through consistency and communication. So I think that's always the piece, right? So I hope that was helpful. Let's see, what's our second one here? Irate parent follow-up. What do you do when a parent doesn't accept your response and continues to escalate? Hmm. Yeah, so I think we've all been through this, right? And I think for me, like I'm trying to think of a certain, situation, but it always comes down to uh, let's make sure that they feel heard. Let's set guardrails around this conversation. Let's make sure that we've worked to investigate their, concern. We want to educate them on the policy and the process. And we want a better way forward, right? It's always about that, right? Always want a better way forward. And I think, for me, if a parent is just going to continue to just come back on the same thing over and over and over again, you're just going to stay true to the process. So one like question might be, when we meet, what are we meeting about? Because we've already met and we, decided on these three things, right? Whatever it may be. So I think it's always important. Like you're responsible for your response, not their reaction. So getting really clear about here's where we are. And if they want to continue to follow the process, they could go to the next level, right? They could file like a grievance, but then remind them, remember a grievance. Here's the definition of it. And it's not that you're upset, it's that you feel that we didn't follow like a policy, right? So I would always stick to the process when it comes to angry and irate people. And I always thank them for bringing great things to our attention because we can always learn from it, right? We can always learn from it. That's my best response. Probably not how I've always reacted. I think I got two more here. Let's see. So one from the Zoom. Oh God. Staff coasting. How do you address staff who start coasting towards the end of the year without creating more tension? Well, I think this goes back to your standards, right? And making sure that you have a staff, you've got real clarity on what success looks like in your classroom every day, what your expectations are of your folks, making sure that you're taking the time to get into rooms on a daily basis and just thank them for being there. I see how hard you're working, anything that I can help you with, right? And then, when you're doing it, you on the other side is you call it out, say, hey, I happen to see, right, that kids are doing worksheets for the third straight day, or I was looking at your lesson plans, or I mean, whatever it be, right? Just use the VRUOL process. Vision, this is what we expect to see. Reality, this is what I do see. You help me understand. Okay, well, I see that you're trying to get kids time to like catch up, right? But that's why we have anchor projects, or that's why we have all these other things in play. I mean, whatever it may be, you need to call it out, okay, and make sure you're always praising the behavior you desire to see. So as soon as you see that shift in that, person, you want to immediately make sure that you recognize, the effort that they put in. But again, the end of the year is not the time to lower standards. It's really the time to reinforce and keep our foot in the gas. I think that's a big part of like your teamwork and your, on your daily piece. And look, there's days that not everybody's going to be at their best, right? So you also have to let, people take time when they need time, because everybody needs those mental and physical breaks is really helpful, for that. So I think that's what I just really would, focus on. My system for that would be the VRUOL. Now, if I've got somebody who's like coasting to the point where they're not, coming to work, right? Or they're not, prepared, like that's a whole different level of, conversation. That's, this is what it means to work here. These are my expectations on a daily basis. Is there anything I could do to make sure you can reach those goals day by day, right? For the rest of the year, because I've got 24 or 50 kids in your like classrooms that are relying on you, right? And accountabilities that I can count on you to be prepared on a daily basis. Let's see what else we got. A bunch of good ones in here. I think one more about EC. There's one here, exceptional children. How do you lead confidently when you feel exposed in areas like EC compliance? I think, one of the most important parts when you have like a special, division of your schools, whether it's AIG, ESL, exceptional children, your MTSS, right? There needs to be really quality people in those roles. And I think sometimes, uh, you know, we haven't fully prepared adults for those seats. And so I think one thing that I would always do is make sure that I acknowledge the complexity of the role, that we lean heavy into systems, training, and documentation, and always fall on the side of transparency. And so like when you're working with students with disabilities, and you're building that, program out, you really need to make sure that you're really thinking ahead and you're looking at your population, who's actually like, what are the trends that are coming here, right? Or what are the consistent issues that our general ed, teachers are really seeing. Like if you think about this, if a student who has a learning disability, uh, they spend 80% of their day in a general ed classroom, 20% of their day with their case manager, right? How much training have we provided the general ed teachers on how to support students with learning disabilities? Is that on your professional development log this past year, right? Or kids with, behavior issues or like any of that. And so if you're starting to see a major percentage of your students either are students with disabilities or are being referred to MTSS, that to me is a trigger for better tier one instruction. So those would be things I'd be looking at, right? Acknowledge the complexity, lean in the systems, training and documentation. Don't avoid it, right? Just continue to work to grow it and improve it and find the best, people you can to help support the program. So this might be a third party provider, right? May be the person that you need in that school for 6 months to a year to train your current, staff to be able to handle all the complexity that, comes in with a really strong exceptional children's program. And I think this goes back to don't be mad you got problems. Know that you're going to have problems, and your job as the leader is to help solve some of those. So confidence doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes with following really clear systems and being able to identify the individuals who can help me, right? So this could be other schools, this could be third, party providers. It's like a better hiring and, development plan for sure, with all those pieces. And those things are real. I mean, those things are real. So, but anyway, I think those are all the questions we're going to do today. So, all right. Great Monday. Thanks everybody for leaning in today. If you don't have a question, I'm gonna roll off. Everybody's good? Right. Thanks everybody. Have a great week. Make sure you come back in next Monday. That'll be lesson 6. We'll be halfway through the series. Take care.